You ask why man suffers more than the beast, why the animal, though subject to the same natural forces, seems to endure without despair. The answer is as simple as it is terrible. The animal lives only in the present. It feels pain, but does not contemplate it. It does not anticipate death, does not relive past shame, does not tremble at the meaningless of its own striving. In man, however, the intellect, our so-called gift, has lifted us above the narrow immediacy of instinct, and in doing so, has burdened us with a torment that no other creature endures. The beast runs from danger, but it does not know fear. It feels hunger, but not the anxiety of starvation. It mates, but does not long for romance, nor is it haunted by rejection. Only man is condemned to look upon the world and ask, why? This question is our greatness and our ruin, for there is no answer that can redeem it. In giving birth to reflective consciousness, nature did not bestow a blessing, but inflicted a wound. This wound deepens with every act of thinking. The intellect tears us from the blind harmony of the will's workings. The animal wills, but does not know that it wills. It is one with the world. But man, having been given knowledge, becomes a stranger to life. He sees the horror behind appearances. He sees the agony of nature, where all life feeds upon life, where birth guarantees suffering, where death comes not as justice, but as necessity. He sees that all striving ends in disappointment, that every desire, once fulfilled, births a new craving. He sees that happiness is not a state, but merely a pause in suffering, and worse, he sees that others do not see. He lives among the blind, shouting warnings from the cliff's edge, only to be mocked for refusing to dance. Thus, the intellect, which promised enlightenment, becomes a curse. It has revealed to us the veil of Maya, the illusion of permanence, of self, of meaning. We come to realize that the world we thought solid is but a representation, spun by our senses and conditioned by our categories. Behind it lies not a benevolent God, nor a rational order, but the will, blind, aimless, and eternal. The will knows no morality, no purpose, no goal. It is the impulse to exist, to push forward, to propagate and devour. And we, as its highest expression, suffer most from its tyranny. For we alone perceive it. We alone can neither escape it nor unsee it. This is why human life is marked by a pain unknown to other beings. Our intellect allows us to envision ideals, justice, truth, beauty, yet the world offers only injustice, lies, and decay. We long for love, yet find only need and projection. We pursue truth, yet live in delusion. And even in our greatest moments, even in the soaring of art or the serenity of contemplation, the shadow of suffering returns. No joy can endure, no peace can be kept. For the will stirs again, restless, hungry, relentless. In man, the will has become conscious, and this consciousness is agony. It is for this reason that I have always maintained, the more a man thinks, the more he suffers. Not because he invents pain, but because he becomes aware of what has always been. The fool laughs because he does not understand. The wise man weeps because he does. We may envy the beasts for their simplicity, or the child for his ignorance, but we cannot return. Once the veil is lifted, it cannot be lowered again. And thus, the awakening of consciousness is not a triumph. It is a tragic elevation. We are Prometheus, chained by insight, tortured by knowledge, scorched by the fire we stole. But this awareness, terrible as it is also the first condition of liberation, for only the one who sees the will can hope to deny it. Only he who has felt the full weight of existence may begin to step outside it. The world will not change. The will cannot be cured. But in understanding the nature of our suffering, we may at least refuse to be its willing slaves. To know the truth is painful, but it is the only dignity left to man. You may have wondered in your loneliest hours why so few can bear even the simplest truths. Why it is that a single honest sentence can clear a room, end a friendship, or rupture a family. Why, when you speak from your depths, the world meets you not with curiosity, but with defensiveness, ridicule, or silence. The answer is not found in malice, nor in error, but in constitution. Most people are not mistaken. They are structurally incapable of understanding. Their minds are not vessels waiting to be filled with truth, but fortresses built to keep truth out. They do not think, they rearrange received ideas into forms that flatter their instincts and preserve their illusions. Truth for them is not an aim, but a threat. They will never reach it, for they are built not to seek it, but to survive it. Let us be clear. Stupidity, as I use the term, is not a mere absence of knowledge. It is not the inability to solve puzzles, pass exams, or memorize facts. No, true stupidity is metaphysical. It is a hardening of the soul against insight. It is the refusal of the intellect to serve anything beyond the will. The stupid person may be educated, even clever, but his thinking is always subordinate to what he wants to believe. He does not ask, "Is this true?" but rather, "Does this make me feel good? Does it justify what I already do?" This is the mark of the incurably foolish. Not that they are wrong, but that they are unreachable. Argument slides off their minds like rain on wax. Evidence only strengthens their delusions. They do not see, they hallucinate reassurance. Why? Because truth is not comfortable. It does not coddle. It does not flatter your self-image or whisper kind affirmations. It wounds before it heals, and it often leaves a scar. Most cannot bear this. They cannot endure the collapse of their illusions, because those illusions are all that gives their life coherence. Take away the fairy tales of progress, purpose, love, or justice, and what remains? The raw, indifferent machinery of the world, the will, gnawing and grasping, indifferent to morality, hostile to meaning. Few are prepared to see it, even fewer can live with it, and so they retreat into religion, into patriotism, into romance, into endless distraction. Their stupidity is not accidental. It is a defense against the unbearable. This is why, when a man begins to see clearly, he also begins to lose company. Clarity isolates. Insight makes you a stranger. You begin to notice that every conversation is camouflage, that every social script is a ritual of avoidance. You speak plainly, and they say you're negative. You ask real questions, and they call you difficult. You bring truth, and they flee. It is not personal. It is structural. The world is built not on clarity, but on the mutual agreement not to look too closely. Civilization itself is a shared blindness, a pact to ignore what festers beneath the surface. And when you refuse the pact, you become an exile. Do not misunderstand me. There are those who are ignorant but capable of learning. They suffer, they question, they listen. And to such souls, even a small truth can be transformative. But these are the rare exceptions. Most, when confronted with truth, recoil not because it is false, but because it is too accurate. It reveals them to themselves. It strips them of their justifications. And nothing enrages the average man more than being shown his own face without makeup. He would rather burn the mirror than examine the reflection. The consequence of this is profound. It means that dialogue is largely futile, that persuasion in most cases is a form of self-harm, that expecting others to understand what cost you your innocence is the fastest path to madness. You must accept this. You must give up the fantasy of being understood by those who have never dared to think. You must become your own witness. Your sanity must not depend on resonance, but on inner rigor. Speak only when it serves clarity. Share only when it serves your solitude. Expect nothing, and you will be less betrayed. In time, you will come to cherish the silence of not explaining. You will learn the dignity of withholding, of letting fools dance around their own noise while you sit apart, unseduced. This is not arrogance. It is spiritual hygiene. You are not better than them. You are simply more awake, and the awakened soul must guard itself like a candle in the storm. Keep your fire alive. Protect it from those who would snuff it out not out of malice, but out of terror. For to them, your clarity is not wisdom. It is treason. You have been taught to believe that reason governs the human being, that we are rational creatures, moved by logic, persuaded by truth, corrected by evidence. But this is one of the great lies of the modern age, a flattering myth whispered to keep you obedient. In truth, reason is not sovereign. It is a servant. It does not command the will. It obeys it. The will is the master, blind and insatiable, and the intellect is merely its secretary, writing post hoc justifications for what desire has already decreed. Every preference, every judgment, every so-called conclusion is infected from the beginning by the will's primal hunger. Man thinks not to discover what is true, but to obtain what he craves. This is not a cynical opinion. It is a metaphysical fact. What you call yourself, your personality, your opinions, your values, is a manifestation of the will to live, a force older than thought, deeper than speech, indifferent to morality. This will lives in the marrow of your bones, the pulse of your instincts, the tension of your desire. It does not care whether something is good or evil, true or false, only whether it serves survival, pleasure, reproduction, or social dominance. Reason is called in after the fact, like a well-dressed lawyer summoned to defend a crime already committed. It does not guide, it rationalizes. Observe this in yourself. Recall the last time you wanted something fiercely, a person, a position, a possession. Did you reason your way into wanting it? Or did you want it first and then construct arguments to justify the pursuit? That job was suddenly about growth. That woman was suddenly your soulmate. That car was now a practical investment. But in truth, these were costumes. Your will made the decision, and your intellect, like a loyal servant, fetched the mask. This is how the machinery works. The will commands, the intellect obeys, and reason becomes propaganda. Now consider what this means for the masses. If the will rules the mind, then persuasion becomes a farce. You cannot reason someone out of a position they did not reason themselves into. Most beliefs are not conclusions. They are emotional comforts dressed as ideas. When you argue with a fool, you are not contending with his thoughts, but with his fear. Fear of insignificance, fear of change, fear of truth. You may present him with irrefutable evidence, airtight logic, even prophetic insight, and he will nod, smile, and walk away unchanged. Not because he didn't understand, but because he understood too well. To accept your truth would cost him his peace, his story, his self. And so he retreats into the familiar warmth of illusion. This is why stupidity is not a lack of information. It is a resistance to transformation. The will does not want to see. It wants to continue. And whatever threatens its continuity, it brands as danger. Truth is one such danger. The man of clarity is not welcomed, but feared. His presence disrupts the trance. His words shake the foundations. His gaze is intolerable because it sees through the performance. And so, society develops antibodies against him. He is labeled negative, difficult, extreme, insane. Anything to neutralize the threat. For what the herd fears most is not the wolf, it is the mirror. You will find, therefore, that in most situations, silence is stronger than speech, withdrawal more powerful than confrontation. The will cannot be reformed through logic. It can only be seen through, renounced, transcended. This is why the philosopher is not a preacher nor a reformer, but a witness. He does not try to change the world. He tries to see it without distortion. And what he sees is not progress or evolution, but repetition. The same hungers, the same errors, the same illusions, dressed in new costumes, marching in new parades, but always returning to the same futility. This is not pessimism. It is vision unclouded by flattery. To truly think, therefore, is not to construct new arguments. It is to dismantle old delusions, to see how every justification you once clung to was a servant of the will, to recognize that you were not living freely, but enacting a script written by biology, by fear, by inherited desire, and then, if you are strong enough, to stop, not to replace one illusion with another, but to stand in the void, to say, I do not know, I no longer believe, I no longer chase. In that stillness, reason is no longer a puppet. It becomes light, cold, unsentimental, liberating. And in that light, stupidity is no longer frustrating. It is simply inevitable. Now that we understand that reason is a servant to the will, and stupidity is not a deficit but a defense, we must look outward, toward the social body, toward the collective theater where this machinery operates at scale. What do we find? A system that does not merely tolerate stupidity, but exalts it. A civilization built not upon insight, but upon repetition, obedience, and noise. The man who doubts, who sees through, who pauses before he speaks, he is not celebrated. He is dismissed, sidelined, mocked, not because he is incorrect, but because he is unprofitable, uncontrollable, and unafraid. Look closely. The entire structure of modern society is designed to reward those who conform to the momentum of the will, those who desire more, who consume without reflection, who work without questioning the point of work, who love without examining the motives behind their affections. These people are not anomalies. They are the ideal citizens of a world governed by the will to life. The more reactive they are, the more predictable. The more emotional, the more manipulable. The more illusioned, the more governable. And so, they are offered the illusion of status, the performance of agency, and the sedation of mass entertainment. But what of the lucid? What of the man who steps back and sees, who questions the utility of endless ambition, who refuses to be flattered into participation? Society has no place for him, for he is unproductive in the way it measures worth. He does not fuel its economy, nor vote in its pageants, nor hunger for its hollow victories. And so, he is given names: failure, pessimist, coward, dropout. His intelligence is a threat, not because it is destructive, but because it is immune. It cannot be seduced by the promises that keep the masses moving. And so, just as the healthy body rejects a foreign organ, society rejects the one who no longer believes. This rejection is not always violent. It is often soft, quiet, polite. You will notice it when your invitations stop arriving, when your insights are met with nervous laughter or blank stares, when your refusal to play the game is interpreted as bitterness rather than clarity. You have become a mirror, and most people do not want to see themselves. They want to remain within the performance, to hear that their suffering has meaning, that their striving is noble, that their exhaustion will one day be rewarded. To tell them otherwise is not to liberate them, but to insult the entire scaffolding of their life. And yet, this is the philosopher's burden, to see what cannot be said, to walk among the sleepwalkers without shaking them, not out of cowardice, but out of mercy. For, as I have said elsewhere, truth is like the sun. It blinds those who have lived in darkness too long. It must be approached slowly, or not at all. The lucid man must learn to speak in silence, to live in detachment, to carry his insight not as a weapon, but as a quiet lamp. He does not owe the world his correction. He owes himself his clarity. Consider, then, how civilization defines success: the loud, the cheerful, the confident, not the wise. The man who knows little, but declares it loudly, is given the podium. The man who doubts his own conclusions is left to mutter in the shadows. This is not a failure of culture. It is its design. For what the will requires is movement, growth, activity, anything but reflection. It must keep the machine turning. It must keep the eyes outward, not inward. Stupidity is not punished. It is streamlined. Lucidity is not honored. It is quietly buried. And so, if you feel defeated in this world, defeated not by error, but by insight, you must understand, you are not weak. You are incompatible. You are not broken. You are awake in a dream that punishes awareness. Your suffering is not a defect. It is a signal that you were made for something that cannot be found in this world's rewards, that your value lies not in what you produce or prove, but in what you have refused to become. In that refusal there is a strange dignity, not loud, not admired, but real. If the world appears to reward the shallow, the reactive, the comfortably ignorant, it is because the lie is not merely tolerated by most. It is desired, deeply, instinctively, protectively desired. For to live without illusion is not to be free in the way modern men imagine. It is to be exposed, to be stripped of hope, narrative, and the warm veil of shared delusions. Most people cannot endure that. They do not want truth. They want anesthesia that resembles it. They want permission, not philosophy. The lie does not offend them. It saves them from collapse. Let us go further. The will, as I have shown, does not care for truth. It is blind, chaotic, ceaselessly striving. It uses intellect not to uncover reality, but to secure advantage. And so, in the majority of men, reason is not an instrument of liberation, but a servant of illusion. The intellect builds temples not to house the truth, but to sanctify the lie. Religion, politics, optimism, these are not errors, but necessities. They are the narcotics required to keep the herd moving forward into pain, reproduction, and eventual extinction. Without them, the will might falter, and so truth becomes taboo, not because it is refuted, but because it is useless. Observe any man when confronted with a reality that contradicts his comforts. He does not inquire further. He recoils. He clings harder to the very chain that binds him. He calls the truth cynicism, calls the messenger bitter, calls his own fear wisdom. He is not deceived by others. He is complicit in his own delusion. Most men do not suffer from too little knowledge. They suffer from the refusal to metabolize what they already sense. They know at some level that their efforts are futile, that their relationships are conditional, that their goals are borrowed, but they cannot afford to know this consciously. So they choose the lie, every day, again and again. Do not imagine this as cowardice. It is biology. The will to live must protect its own machinery. And truth, real truth, is corrosive to willing. It breaks the spell. It halts movement. A man who sees clearly becomes useless to the species. He no longer strives, no longer breeds, no longer fights for illusionary status. He becomes still, and the will cannot abide stillness. It calls it depression, nihilism, failure. It whispers, return to the chase, desire something, pretend again. Live as if there were purpose, even if you know there is none. Most people accept this deal. They call it being realistic. But you, if you are still here, have not accepted it. You feel the lie every day, and it burns. You walk through a world of smiling actors, all reciting lines they do not believe, and wonder if you are the madman for remaining silent. You are not. You are only alone because you have refused to sell your mind for comfort. You have not failed to believe. You have succeeded in enduring without belief, and that is not weakness. That is power, invisible power, the power to see and not to turn away. I have said, to be wise is to suffer without illusion. Most people suffer with illusion, and even then they crumble. But the man who suffers knowingly, who drinks the truth and remains upright, he has passed beyond the reach of the will. He is no longer useful, but he is free. Not in the political sense, not in the childish sense, but free in the soul, free from the need to be deceived. That is a condition few ever reach, and fewer still can survive. And so, do not waste your life trying to awaken those who dream willingly. Their sleep is not accidental. It is sacred to them. They will hate you for interrupting it. Leave them, not with contempt, but with quiet understanding. Your task is not to change the world. Your task is to see it clearly and not be devoured by what you see. To be intelligent is not to be privileged, but to be burdened. It is to see too clearly through the fog that shields others from despair. Intelligence, in a world governed not by truth, but by illusion, is not a blessing, but a sentence. One does not rise in stature by virtue of insight. One is cast out, not with fury, but with indifference. Because intelligence reveals what others spend their lives trying not to know. It unmasks the scaffolding upon which society rests. The myths of meaning, the pretensions of virtue, the false promises of progress. And in doing so, it disturbs the sleepwalkers. That is its crime. The fool finds comfort in belonging. He mimics opinions, recites slogans, confuses repetition with truth. He fits. The intelligent man, by contrast, begins to question. He begins to see that most human belief is not born of reason, but of fear, that people do not want clarity, they want shelter. They do not want truth, they want continuation. And anything that threatens to expose the constructed nature of their peace will be cast aside. Intelligence, in this sense, is not merely unwanted. It is punishable, because it endangers the collective dream. The more a man understands, the more he must suffer. He sees that conversation is often noise, that friendships are often alliances of convenience, that love, which is praised as noble, is often merely the species using the individual to reproduce itself. He does not hate these things. He simply no longer believes in them as the world presents them, and this non-belief separates him. It is not that others flee him, it is that they never really see him. His depth renders him invisible, and in this invisibility, he becomes truly alone. Society rewards the appearance of intelligence, not its reality. A clever phrase, a fashionable opinion, a moment of performance, these are acceptable. But true, quiet perception, that is unbearable, because it cannot be controlled. It does not obey the mood of the day. It cannot be weaponized by ideology or sold for applause. The truly intelligent man becomes an anomaly. He cannot be owned, and therefore, he must be ignored. Even the intelligent man himself is not free from the suffering his insight brings. He sees his own motives laid bare. He recognizes in himself the same will, the same irrational drive that governs the rest. And this self-awareness does not rescue him. It torments him. For what consolation is there in understanding the machinery of illusion when one cannot escape it? What peace can be found in knowledge, when knowledge itself reveals that peace is built on falsehood? The intelligent man thus retreats. not out of pride, but out of exhaustion. He does not speak because he has nothing to say. He remains silent because he has too much, and he knows what will become of it. His truth will be misunderstood, diluted, or turned against him. So, he observes. He walks through the world as a ghost, present but untouchable, not because he has chosen to abandon others, but because he has understood that they cannot accompany him. Not yet. Perhaps never. And so he lives in exile, not geographical, but metaphysical, exiled from the dreams of the tribe, exiled from the rituals of praise, exiled from the comfort of delusion. It is not that he despises humanity. He mourns it. But his mourning is quiet. It is the solitude of a mind that no longer seeks approval because it no longer believes in its currency. And this, ultimately, is the curse. To be intelligent is not to win the game. It is to understand that the game was never real to begin with. Why does the mass of mankind resist the man who speaks the truth? Why is he not welcomed as a liberator, but feared as a threat? It is not because the truth is unconvincing. It is because the truth demands the death of comfort. The average man, ruled not by thought but by habit, does not live for truth. He lives for continuation. His highest value is not clarity, but cohesion, and so he does not thank the thinker who dismantles his illusions. He banishes him. The bearer of truth is not celebrated, but crucified. It has always been so. Christ was executed not because he lied, but because he revealed too much. Socrates was condemned not for corrupting the youth, but for awakening them. The crowd does not fear error, it fears awakening, because awakening breaks the spell. And without the spell, what remains? A meaningless striving in a world governed by blind will. To see this, as I have seen it, is not to become free, but to become alone. Man is not by nature a lover of truth. He is a builder of fictions, and he needs them, because without them he cannot endure the void. Religion, nationalism, romance, these are not conclusions reached by reason. They are dreams adopted by necessity. They soothe the will. They conceal the terror of contingency. And so, the man who tears away the veil, however gently, is an enemy, not because he hates the crowd, but because he shows it its face. Stupidity, true stupidity, is not the absence of knowledge. It is the refusal of insight. It is not a defect of intellect, but of will. The stupid man is not one who cannot understand. He is one who will not. He senses dimly that knowledge would threaten the structure of his world, and so he builds a fortress of distraction, of convention, of cliché. He does not question because he knows, unconsciously, that to question is to risk despair. In this sense, stupidity is not accidental. It is strategic. It protects the will from collapse. That is why the masses ridicule the philosopher, not because he is wrong, but because he is dangerous. He lives without the protection of illusion. He walks without the armor of belief, and his very existence becomes a challenge. His silence, his solitude, his refusal to partake in the theater. These things offend because they expose the hollowness of the performance. He does not shout in protest. He simply refuses to pretend, and that is intolerable. The man who speaks the truth must expect exile. He must walk alone, not because he is unkind, but because he is uninvited. He does not reject the world. He merely no longer believes in its disguises. And this unbelief, more than any doctrine or dogma, is what makes him a threat, because it cannot be refuted. It can only be ignored or silenced. To live in truth is to live in tension. One sees the suffering of the world and cannot explain it away. One sees the futility of desire and cannot unlearn it. One sees the madness of the crowd and cannot laugh along. And yet, one remains, not to preach, but to witness, not to convert, but to understand. For truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. It is a burden, yes, but it is also the only dignity left to the one who refuses to sleep. To see clearly is to stand on a precipice the world denies exists. It is not the reward of brilliance nor the triumph of logic, but the cruel fruit of detachment. One does not arrive here through ambition, but through loss. Loss of illusion, of purpose, of shared belief. The clear seer finds himself in a realm not elevated, but evacuated. It is the desert that lies beyond the collapse of meaning. And here, truth is no longer a torch, but a weight. For once the veil is torn away, it is not light that greets the eyes, but emptiness. What remains when the falsehoods fall? Not joy, not vindication, not triumph. What remains is silence. The silence of one who no longer hopes. The silence of one who no longer seeks permission to be alone. It is not bitter, it is not loud, it is not proud, it simply is. A stillness not born of peace, but of exhaustion. A stillness that comes when one no longer resists the nature of things. When one stops kicking against the current of the will and lets himself be carried, lucid and resigned, to wherever the torrent ends. This is the final gift of the defeated philosopher. Not wisdom that heals, but clarity that quiets. He does not offer a system to master the world. He offers the courage to no longer need one. He does not call for rebellion. He calls for release. He does not promise happiness. He describes the anatomy of its absence. And in that description, strange as it seems, many find relief. Because it is better to suffer in the truth than to smile in the lie. To live silently, then, is not to hide. It is to decline performance. It is to let others play their roles while you sit beyond the curtain, not in superiority, but in still awareness. It is to see the lover as the bait of the species, the patriot as the servant of abstraction, the optimist as the child refusing to wake. You do not mock them. You do not save them. You simply cease to follow. Their drama continues. You, meanwhile, observe. And if there is dignity, it lies here. Not in the applause of others, but in the simple fact that you are no longer fooled, that you have renounced the comfort of illusion for the pain of vision, that you no longer chase what flees, nor clutch what fades. This is not victory, it is not defeat. It is the final station of a man who has stopped pretending. The stage remains crowded, but you have taken your seat among the few who watch in silence and see. This, then, is the philosophy of the defeated. It does not console, it does not redeem, but it liberates. And in a world ruled by illusion, that alone is sacred. If these words stirred something in you, leave a comment below, not to seek answers, but to affirm that you have also seen. And if you wish to remain in the company of those who do not flinch before the truth, subscribe. I will not offer hope, but I will never insult you with lies.